Welcome back. The doctor is in. Today I'm going to be talking about writing the Draconis Combine chapter in BattleTech Field Manual 3145. This is kind of an interesting project as I don't really remember working on it. I know I did. I have the files, but I think perhaps because I only did the Draconis Combine section that I have less memory than when I was writing 3 sections in earlier field manuals. So let's go ahead and dig into the material. First, we've got the introductory section. So every faction that gets its own chapter has kind of an overview section that introduces the faction for the era in which the field manual is set. So what I've got to do is familiarize myself with the Dark Age era up to the 3145. So the Dark Age era begins in, I believe, 3128, 3130, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it's one of these things that took a good deal of research to catch up on all the events that led to the 3145 period. I did that kind of looking at summaries rather than reading all of the novels. There hadn't been much in the way of source books, so really, unless you read all the novels, you have to go with some of the summaries that existed for the writers to use. So, one of the things that is going on in 3145 is that the Draconis Combine has invaded the Federated Suns with serious intent, and they've actually made even greater progress than they made in the First Succession War, which previously had been the worst the Federated Suns ever fared. Really, what we're seeing is that the writers kind of have a hate-on for the Federated Suns. I'm talking, well, the development team, whoever, they really want to punish the Federated Suns for all of the success they had earlier. Or at least that's the way it seems if you're from the outside looking in, which most of us had been prior to this point. Because, there hadn't been any source books, really. There had been an error report that came out shortly before this. Then we had the technical readouts. And now we've got the field manual. So what we need to do is try to explain why things are working the way they are, why the Federated Suns is faltering so badly, whereas it had either held the ground or gained ground for centuries. And now it's being eaten away by both the Draconis Combine and the Capellan Confederation. So really what I want to point out here, and as far as what you see on this page, down there in the bottom right, I have that the warlord for the new Samarkand military district has the name Angmar Kuzu. I think that's an awesome name, so I got to throw in my homage to Lord of the Rings with the Witch King of Angmar, and I'm quite elated because I think it's a cool sounding name, and that's probably my, for this era, one of my biggest contributions is naming that warlord. And that's probably all I have to say really about the introductory section. Let's go ahead and move on to, and I'm just going to go through these quickly because there are so many of them. There are the Benjamin regulars, and there are all the regulars, so each military district has its own brigade of troops, and these are the regulars. So there's the Benjamin Military District, Benjamin Regulars, the Pest Military District, Pest Regulars, and so on. And really what I'm doing here is I'm trying to condense any information that existed in previous sources, give as brief a summary as I can, because you only get one page to cover the entire brigade, and you need to mention each of the individual regiments. It's sometimes a very tough balancing act, and it's really up to the reader to determine whether I succeeded in that. It's a difficult challenge sometimes, because you only get about 600, maybe 700 words to tell the entire story for this era of an entire brigade of troops. And as I said, I will leave that to you to decide. So again, here we've got the Diron regulars. The Diron regulars had actually gone away because the Diron military district, including the world of Diron, the prefecture capital, or the district capital, had joined the Republic of the Sphere at the end of the Jihad. So one of the things that the Draconis Combine did was retake much of that former military district back from the Republic by this point. After doing so, they reformed the Diron Regulars. So that's why these are 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. They had to restart brand new regiments. Even though some of the original Diron Regulars had been shifted to other military district after that territory was given to the Republic. So now they've got it back, and they create a new brigade with brand new numbering. The Galadon Regulars, this is an interesting situation. If you remember when I discussed Field Manual 3085, the Galadon military district was renamed because the world of Galadon was effectively destroyed by a biological weapon. The world was quarantined, and it was bombarded from orbit to prevent anybody trying to escape and spread the disease to other worlds, which did happen in at least one other case. And so with the district capital destroyed, it was moved to New Samarkand, and that became the New Samarkand military district. And speaking of which, here's the New Samarkand Regulars. So I remember vaguely from 3085 that there was a kind of a discussion as to what this brigade should be called. Should it be called New Samarkand Regulars? Was New Samarkand even going to be the new district capital? I have some recollection of that, and I believe I was the one who made the final decision by just writing it as New Samarkand. I could be mistaken on that, so maybe take that anecdote with a grain of salt, but I do have a recollection of that being an issue, and that I simply said, I'm doing New Samarkand. And part of the reason is because New Samarkand used to be the capital of the Draconis Combine before it was moved to Luthien. Then we've got the Pest Military District, another case of just trying to squeeze as much information in here as possible. So here the 3rd Pest Regulars, used to be the 3rd Proserpina Hussars. They were in elite command during the Jihad and prior to that, when that world was given to the Republic. They were renamed the 3rd Pest Regulars. And here what I'm pointing out is that when Proserpina was reclaimed from the Republic, they thought they were going to return to Proserpina as the 3rd Proserpina Hussars, but the High Command, or I'm sorry, the warlords told them no. And they're unhappy, even though they are posted near their ancient homeworld. They're not allowed to go there and return to their original name and their original home. So there's a little discontent. I'm trying to inject just a little bit of animosity from the troops to their commanders. It's always something that you want to try to do, just for a little storytelling in this, again, 100 words or so that I had to devote to that brigade. One of the ways that space is saved in field manuals is taking smaller brigades and squeezing them onto the same page with each other. So that's what we have here. We've got the 1st and 2nd Genosha, the Otomo, and the Aizenaga Warriors. These are, in an ideal world, the Genosha would have their own page, and the Otomo and Aizenaga Warriors have shared a page in the past. Here, again, for space considerations, they had to be crammed together. So here we've got 3 brigades on one page, even less space to try to create plot threads or story points for people to focus on in their role-playing campaigns. Just sort of the frustration that you have to deal with when you're writing a major faction in a source book and you've got limited space in which to do it. The Sword of Light, one of my favorite brigades, even though they're Draconis Combine, just because their acronym is SOL. I always get a little bit of a chuckle when I think of that. They are the premier command of the Draconis Combine, and they have been for centuries. What's interesting is that the Second Sword of Light, which was for a very long time the elite of the elite. They were the best in the brigade and the best, and therefore in the combine as a whole. After the jihad, they were stricken from the rolls because some of their, or the bulk of the troops had opposed the coordinator and supported the Black Dragon movement. Here they have returned to the rolls and are again part of the brigade with new personnel. Obviously, it's been 60 years, so there's not as much of the ancestral conflict to lean on, so you just have to try to squeeze some story out of that as best you can. We've got the Sun Jiang Cadre. This is the premier Mech Warrior Academy in the Draconis Combine, one of the best in the Inner Sphere, and because they are so well respected, they get a very large enrollment, and most of their cadets serve in one of the cadre regiments before being assigned to either a regular brigade, perhaps the Sword of Light for the very best cadets, and so on. The Ghost regiments are, an interesting story. In the War of 3039, they appeared and helped prevent the stop cold the invasion by the Federated Suns. These are mostly Yakuza piloting the battle mechs and driving the tanks. And the reason they're called the Ghost Regiments is because they had never appeared on any official roll, and so when they appeared, it was essentially as if ghosts had appeared because no one expected troops to be there. So since these were never appearing on any official documentation, the Federated Suns had no expectation of them appearing, and that's why they're called the Ghost Regiments. The Legion of Vega and the Ryukin, again, we've got two brigades crushed into a single page, and even though the Legion of Vega is listed first, their individual descriptions are second. I think that must have been something I did perhaps on accident. I'd have to look at the original file. I don't know why. Just seeing that bothers me. If I'm going to list them first at the top of the page, then their individual paragraphs should have come first. So what we're looking at here is the Ryukin are the 5 regiments that were originally formed to try to replicate the Wolf's Dragoons, but in service to the Combine. And the Legions of Vega are the home for the disaffected mech warriors, the discipline cases, the pains in the ass that no one else wants to deal with, tend to get assigned to the Legion of Vega. One last chance to try to redeem their honor before they are either drummed out of the military, maybe they'll be executed for dereliction of duty or cowardice, whatever their issues were. That's what the Legions of Vega are all about. And then we have alternate paths. So here are the other brigades. We've got the Arcab Legion, the Anting Legion, the Amphigean Light Assault Group. Again, we got 3 brigades crushed onto a single page. It's a space-saving measure. Certainly the Arcab Legion has enough regiments. They should have gotten their own page, but space considerations are beyond my control, so you do what you're asked to do. The Arcab Legions are the predominantly Muslim regiments from the Arcab worlds. And the Amphigean Light Assault Group has kind of a muddled history. Sometimes they were referred to as a mercenary group, sometimes they're referred to as an independent command. And the Anting Legion is, again, kind of a brigade that has another muddled history. Not really a brigade, they're just a single regiment at this point. There had been other Anting regiments in the past that had been destroyed. And that's really all I have to say about any of the individual brigades. What I want to focus on is that there were some issues with after all of the individual brigades, there are these tables that show up that list where the regiments are deployed, list all their commanders. So I created a list of commanders for all of the regiments. And I remember getting a complaint that I used too many Japanese names, which seems ridiculous to me in a culture that is dominated by the Japanese. So even if people are not necessarily ethnically Japanese, I argued, they may have Japanese names. And I believe this was the source where I actually took a name from an older source book and used it again, and people complained. They said that I had made an error, because I used the same name, and obviously that guy would be like 200 years old. People can have the same name as their ancestors, or people with a similar surname may name someone with the given name in homage as a namesake. And it just bothers me that people think no one can have the same name in the universe. I guess there's only one Bob Smith in all of the BattleTech universe to their minds. So things like that aren't necessarily an error. Just come ask the writers. We'll tell you if we intended it, if it was an accident, that kind of thing. I'll tell you right now, I intended it not as the same person, but as perhaps a descendant, grandson, maybe a great-grandson. Life expectancies are pretty good in the BattleTech universe. Victor Davian lived to be 130-ish. So let's just wrap that up. That's all I really have to say about Field Manual 3145. It's kind of a blank spot for the most part. All of the actual details, the text that I wrote, are completely unfamiliar to me. I can read it and recognize my syntax, but I don't really remember working on this book. I think because all of the technical readout stuff and Wars of the Republic era, these were all coming out at around the same time, so I was very busy, and I imagine I wrote this in probably a week. And this was back when I was still working, so this would have been on weekends, maybe 3 weekends, or perhaps working at night after work. So it's understandable that some of this, and after you've written the same faction in multiple field manuals and field reports and all that, things sort of blend together. And I think that may be contributing to why I don't really remember this book specifically. But that's all I've got really to say for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoy my work, why not check out my newest book, Cats of War 2. It's available exclusively on Amazon. You can get it in paperback. You can get it for the Kindle. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free to read. This is 4 brand new tales of military fantasy and military science fiction with a feline twist. It's a novel-length book. I hope you'll check it out. And that's all I've got for today. The Doctor is out.